Hello, and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I'm pleased to have with me back on the show today my good friend Sarah Evans. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me back.
Yeah, I can't remember the last episode we did. I know last year we did the Oscar nominated documentaries. And this year we're not doing Oscar nominated documentaries, partially because a lot of them I think are not even available. But we're going to do a different take on this, which was actually Sarah's idea. We're calling it Close to Home. So these are documentaries by Oregon filmmakers. And in some cases, although I don't think all of them, but well, were all of them filmed in Oregon too? I
All of
didn't
them
think about.
had at least some of their filming in North.
That's true. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, they all of them had at least some of the filming in Oregon. So we're talking about close to home docs. And Sarah and I looked through a list. I think you found these in an article, I think. And so we kind of picked through the ones we wanted to do. So I'll start off with our first film, which is Trees and Other Entanglements, which came out last year by director Irene Taylor. This is an HBO documentary. And so going in, I was really excited because HBO documentaries usually signifies, high quality, really great documentaries. HBO has been long known for their quality of their documentaries. Unfortunately, this one is not one of those, in my opinion. I really disliked this movie. I really had, I have to admit, I did not know much about it going in. Partially because even the description is very vague. It's like people's stories and how their lives are intertwined with trees. I mean, so there could be there's a lot of directions you could go with that. So tells a bunch of different stories about different people. Quite a few of them are in Oregon, not all. It goes from Vancouver Island, as far north as Vancouver Island, as far south as the White Mountains of California, and explores different people and their connections to trees. Oh, and there's someone in New York as well, now that I think about it. So it's not all West Coast. And some of the stories I really like. The problem when you tell like six kind of disparate stories is that then you have the ones that you don't like. So I liked the story of the woman in New York whose parents were caregivers of this massive property for years, and they took care of it for 50 years, and then their legacy was kind of forgotten. I thought her story was really great. I thought the woman who was kind of caregiving for the trees kind of in her neighborhood was really great. But then you had these, so I would just talk about the bonsai tree guy because this guy, they focus a lot on this guy who, and I will say, like a white guy who had gone to Japan to learn about bonsai trees, but then came back to the US and decides to make it his thing. He's like the bonsai tree expert or whatever. This guy was just kind of a noxious personality, in my opinion, and I hope yours too. But then there's this like weird thing that happens in the movie, and I'm going to say spoiler alert. So people that plan to watch this documentary, just turn off the sound right now. Um, where probably about halfway through the movie, they show on camera footage all around his property. He has all these bonsai trees on his property that he's cultivated for years. They show this woman like breaking into the property and like smashing all the trees and like going through his house and rubbing blood all over the walls and smashing up his house. And then she takes her clothes off and she's running around naked. They're kind of like, what is going on? Turns out this is his ex-girlfriend. And the movie addresses this more as like him like just crying and being really upset over his bonsai trees and not like, okay, what's going on with this guy that his ex-girlfriend is so angry that she like went through his house and smashed everything and is running around naked and like, and then they just never address it again the rest of the film. And I was kind
It
of
was
like,
so, I didn't catch that it was his ex-girlfriend. Did he say that?
that they mention it briefly and he just said, well, yeah, I guess she's really mad at me. I was like,
I
yeah,
didn't
you
even
think?
catch who is this lady and why is this happening? And it was so disturbing and and then completely unexplained. It was like,
Completely. And
what?
it was like, what does this have to do with anything? What does this have to do about the trees? Like, why are we here? You know, I could see why they had to keep it in because obviously it was a major thing, but then you have to explain it, you know, like, and talk to this guy about, like, well, why did you do that? This woman's so angry that she smashed up your house, smeared her own blood all over your house. That's kind of an extreme act. It kind of makes you wonder about him. And it's just bizarre. But, and then it gets into, they interview Weyerhaeuser, which obviously is a big symbol here in the Northwest, right? And Weyerhaeuser is huge, but there's like no, that thread also got dropped, I felt like.
It was confusing to me. Like I couldn't get what he was trying to say about it because it felt like at least the first half she was kind of painting Weyerhaeuser as almost like the big evil that cuts down all the trees that everyone loves.
Uh-huh.
Then, but then she like pivoted a little and was like, oh, but they also planted a bunch of trees and they have a bonsai garden. So I was like, wait, so now are you just like, I came out the end like, I don't really know what you're trying to say about Weyerhaeuser. And then it felt like she interviewed George Weyerhaeuser just a few months before he passed away. And it felt kind of a weird way to tell this story about this man who had recently passed because I really didn't know what she was trying to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he was kidnapped as a kid, and the whole telling the story of his kidnapping was again, it was done in a weird way that I just didn't get where she was going with that or why she focused so much on it.
It's a
Like,
quite a big chunk. And then they're like, I don't know if they're trying to connect that to trees somehow, because he says, well, yeah, I'm involved with trees, but it's like, no, it's because your family is like super wealthy. I mean, that's why it was
right.
kid. They were trying to do it as a ransom, right? So what does this have to do with trees? And then they kind of drop and let off the hook like Weyerhaeuser's legacy of, like, you know, clear cutting. And I don't know. It just
Yeah.
yeah. There's just a lot of loose ends in the movie like that. There's the guy that plants trees, which is great and has been doing it for years in clear cutted areas. But again, it never worked for me. The film never came together as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of loose threads of stories that just sometimes I didn't get how they related to the main point or really to each other. So yeah, I loved the beautiful shots in this film of all the trees and nature and whatnot. It had the most beautiful imagery of all these movies we watched for this episode, but the story was just yeah, I just didn't get it at
Yeah.
all.
It just maybe kept thinking maybe we should just get not talk about the people, because every time the people were on, I was like, can we just go back to looking at the trees? The trees are cool, but these people, most of these people, I could just do without here. So kind
Yeah,
of just brought
yeah,
up my misanthropic side because it was like, okay, yeah, some of the trees, like that one really cool knotted tree that the bonsai guy was looking at in California in the White Mountains, like that tree was really cool looking. I don't know how
yeah,
I feel about him always clipping off of it for his little bonsais, but it's
yeah.
a cool tree, but I just kept thinking, why does he have to be here? So
I
that's my
know it was so there's so much unexplained. Yeah, what do we do 4 stars on this?
4 stars. So what are you
I,
giving it?
I would give it 2.
That's what I'm giving it also too.
Yeah,
2 stars for the trees. Yay,
yeah, I
trees.
love the trees. I thought I was gonna love this one, and it just wasn't
Yeah,
done well.
yeah, I agree. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next one,
Yeah,
which I think is you.
yeah. The next film we're going to talk about is Lost Women of Highway 20. And this was a documentary series, I believe also on HBO. And it was from 2023, so this is a pretty new one. And it's about multiple murders of women in the late 70s through early 90s along this very remote stretch of Highway 20 um, between, the coast and Bend. And this was actually based originally on a multimedia project from the Oregonian that back in 2018. And I read that and watched the videos with that when that came out and thought it was just a phenomenal series and really well done. I was actually surprised to hear there was a docu-series then made about that same thing, but because I thought they had done such a good job. But what I appreciated about the Oregonian series was that it really focused on trying to tell the stories of these women. I haven't said the main part yet. I just realized it was one guy who killed them all. So, but
Yeah.
rather than focusing on the serial killer, it was more on trying to tell the stories of these women and how they might have gotten to that place, and then how mainly how the justice system completely failed these women and their,
Oh, yeah.
and the docu-film also kind of takes generally the same focus. This is a very this of the films we watched, this one felt the closest to home, uh, because
Because we've driven that road before.
I've driven that road so many times, and I know how remote it is out there. And also, I just I had really enjoyed the Oregonian series, and so it was interesting, definitely, to see some more of the folks involved in the story talking about it. Um, I will say I liked the original series better than this docu series. It's a very interesting story still. Um, Honestly, I hated the narration that they put over
Oh,
this.
I know, it's terrible.
And it wasn't it Octavia Spencer who did the narration. I was like, what a waste of her talent. They gave her like the worst words to read. It was just every time it was the narration part, I was like, oh, this is so stupid and obnoxious. Oh, the monster, the trees saw the monster. And I was like, oh, just get back to the story.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's a very frustrating and sad story because the system really did fail these women and their families. Multiple murders in this series shouldn't have even happened because they already knew who was committing the murders, and they just didn't bother to work hard enough to put them away.
Yeah, for several decades. Yeah, no, and I did not see the Oregonian series or know much about this, so it was pretty disturbing for me, especially, you even see the signs on Highway 20, like Salem to Bend, and they're like, this way to Salem. I'm like, oh, but, and man, does not make any of the legal officials, especially Lynn County, geez Louise, look good. Won't say anything too upsetting there, but yeah, there was a lot. The narration is what brought it down a whole star for me because, I get that Octavia Spencer produced it, and so maybe I don't really, there was no
Oh,
reason for the narration at all, like
yep.
zero. And like you said, it added this kind of hokey true crime, like the monster was lurking in the woods. It's like I don't like that. I also don't like that whole um kind of just portrayal of killers as people as monsters. It's just, he's obviously a really awful man who did horrible, horrible, evil things, but this like terminology of monster just doesn't sit right with me. The trees are not watching. The trees are just being trees, like they're doing their thing. So it's just like it was just annoying. The narration was very hyped up, and then comparison to the stories. What I liked about being able to watch the documentary is seeing all the people they interviewed, and then also Noelle Crombie, the reporter from the Oregonian who did the actual series. They interview her quite a bit on her reporting and a lot of what she discovered, which of course is what the movie's based on. But how the justice system failed, but also I think what it's beyond the justice system, sort of like the good old boy network in Oregon, like the fact that this guy also went unquestioned for so many years was he was like a local. I mean, that was kind of the way they put it.
Yeah.
He was one of their guys. And the fact that when his stepdaughter went missing, he actually led the search, despite the fact he had this previous record, right?
Yeah.
He led the search for her. And he's the one navigating them around the forest because he knows this area better than anyone. And no one thought he knows this area better than anyone. So he probably knows where to hide a body. And so there's so many tragic elements to this. And yeah, that I can recommend it because I found it fascinatingly watchable. I mean, I couldn't take my eyes off of it, even though I was super annoyed by the narration. But I
Mhm.
just, because of the story, is just, and I'm not usually a true crime person. It's probably less interesting for people that don't know Oregon, maybe. But for me, it was really interesting. And that because I know these areas, I've been by them. I'm not an outdoors person like you are, Sarah, but I've driven Highway 20. If you drive from Salem to Bend, you've driven Highway 20, right? So I got it from that perspective. But also, I found it infuriating, like the very earliest woman, before the woman in Eugene went missing, if they had caught him the first time when he assaulted the one woman and they didn't believe her, even though his story was totally implausible, beyond implausible. When he said to the police, like, "Oh yeah, I picked her up and she was just crying about wanting to get home to her baby, and then she got in the truck and then hit on me." It's like they believed that, and like all her clothes were torn, her boots were ripped, like she did that. She just who would get into a car with a guy crying about your baby and then like all of a sudden be like, "Yeah, I'm into you." It's just like doesn't even make sense. It's like,
No.
and it's not just
And
about
well, not just that she was a woman, but she was also a Native American woman.
right,
It just strikes against her for them believing her. And it was
right.
so sad and so made me so angry. And this woman's like in her 60s now, and it still hurts her every day what
Yeah,
he
she
did.
still has all this trauma. And the
Mhm.
fact that she watched all this happen and she's like, they could have caught him back when he did what he did to me, and all these women would still be alive.
Yes.
So,
This is
yeah.
a very hard film to watch because it's so, well, it's traumatic what happens in the film to these women. It makes you angry, makes you sad. But I do agree, like, it is an interesting story. I'm glad it's been told. I'm glad these women are at least getting some, they're not getting a true voice, but at least someone's paying attention to them. Um, so I don't know. How many stars did you give this one?
I'm going to give it 3 because I do
Mhm.
recommend it, but it's not, like I said, it would have been a higher rating, I think, if it wasn't for that terrible voiceover. What are you
Yeah,
giving it?
I'd probably give it 3 as well, but with almost like a trigger warning. Like I know a lot of people couldn't watch this because the trauma
Oh
might
yeah,
do
it's too
to them.
upsetting for some people. So yeah,
Yeah,
I would say watch it at your own. If you've had trauma like this, or if these types of things tend to upset you, definitely,
yeah,
might be too much to watch. So
definitely an interesting story though.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, our
Well,
last two at least are a little lighter, so that's good.
yeah, we got the serious stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the next one we're going to talk about is The Last Blockbuster. This came out in 2020, and this is a documentary about really the rise and fall of Blockbuster. And then it really hones in on the one last location of Blockbuster that's still left standing, which is in Bend, Oregon. This was directed by Taylor Morden, and I would be remiss if I didn't take a quick chance to call out a ska reference. Taylor also directed a cool ska documentary called "Pick It Up Ska" in the '90s about
Mm,
the whole '90s, trend of ska at that time, and just had to call that out. You know me.
yeah.
So anyway, this was a fun movie. Um, in that it's really going for trying to recapture the nostalgia around video stores. It's very focused on like just interviewing people, both locals who still love video stores to big people like Kevin Smith. Like it's a range of folks just, remembering what it was like to go into the video store and pick up all the films and try to make your choice. And maybe depending where you went, you might chat with the people who work there about their recommendations. This is a very nostalgia based film.
Big
um,
time.
Big time. And I did find it interesting. I didn't really know how Blockbuster had come to rise to its prominence. Because I remember more going to my local video stores for a long time. And when Blockbuster came in, it was kind of the negative because it kind of closed
Yeah.
out video stores. But it was interesting to hear what they did differently that made them succeed. And then this little store in Bend that's left, it's like it's cool that I think that they've hung on. I think what all the reasons that are put forward as to why this one people love this one so much, which is really like nostalgia, of course, but that it's like a little family owned place. Everyone there treats you like family. They greet their customers like family. They do the recommendations, all the things that are great about that last Blockbuster are the things I thought were great about independent video stores. So I had this little thing in my Blockbuster wasn't like that in my town. I'll just say that. Um, So I had kind of a weird little conflict in my head. Like, I really saw it more as nostalgic about the old independent video store than I did about Blockbuster in
Yeah.
particular. But curious to hear what you thought.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, I have mixed feelings about this movie as well. It's nice that it highlights the nostalgia over video stores, but I wish it wasn't about Blockbuster because I don't have positive connotations of Blockbuster for the same reasons as you. They knocked out a lot of the little guys. I wish that they had done a movie instead about Movie Madness in Portland, which is still existing
Oh
and
yeah,
still one of the largest video stores in the world with over 80,000 titles and growing. And I'm going to give a shout out to Movie Madness in Portland because they are independent and have continued to survive and are a place that has, for instance, movies by director and art house movies and cult movies and everything. And Blockbuster actually did away with a lot of that curation that local stores had. And ironically, out of remember Hollywood Video, which they didn't even talk about, which I thought was odd, was the
I
other
did
big
too.
chain at the time. And I remember when those were the only two chains you had to choose from. I always went to Hollywood because Blockbuster actually edited their rated R movies. They would like take out content to make it more family friendly, basically censored the movies, which they didn't talk about in this movie.
Oh, I
And
didn't.
Hollywood Video did not carry any censored movies. And so, um, but I think the feeling of like the idea of going into a store and interacting with people and picking up your snacks. And I mean, I liked that aspect of it. And there's a lot of fun people in the movie. Kevin Smith, Ron Funches, who shout out to Ron Funches, comedian from Salem, but he's obviously a lot bigger now. But he's in there talking about um, his video store nostalgia.
Yeah.
But all the people that walk into the store and they're just like, "Wow, Blockbuster!" I was like, "Okay, I also was grading, and I guess it's 2020, but like the movie's portrayal of Bend as like this quaint small town is pretty laughable. In my head, I'm like, Bend, the quaint small town that's also the most expensive place to live in Oregon and home to all these millionaires with like mansions. And, it's Bend is not really that quaint. I think the isolation of the area might be the reason that particular store is hung on maybe. But this idea, especially the Hollywood people that were in there saying like, where this has got to be some like town in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, well, not really. Actually, there's a lot of millionaire Californians skiing there right now as we speak. So
True, that's true. Yeah. Well, it I think that I'll just say my kids watch this film with me. They've never seen a videotape. They've never seen a video store. And they
time
love
to
this
correct that,
movie.
Sarah. I have VHS. You can come. They can come over to my house and hold a VHS in their hand. Take them to Movie Madness in Portland. Yeah. So
Oh, well, they love this movie. Like, I think the director did an awesome job, really, of capturing that nostalgia so much
uh,
that they felt caught up in it, even though they had no reference for it. Like, they're just like,
yeah, that's
we gotta
interesting.
go to the last Blockbuster. That sounds really cool. Like,
Yeah,
so
so they were interested in, well, I think
yeah.
there's, physical products and one of the people in there does say like they wouldn't be surprised if video stores came back. Not that they've ever gone away entirely, but sort of like record stores did and
Yeah,
LPs are bigger than ever now. Record LPs are
yeah,
huge, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if, that happened. I don't know if it'll happen with VHS honestly, because it was always a garbagey format. I mean, other
it
than
was.
being heavy, it just doesn't look great. But like DVDs and Blu-rays, I still buy them. I know I'm in the minority, but I think someday it could turn back around, especially with all these streaming services jacking up their prices and adding ads to everything. People might find the need for good old-fashioned physical product again. So you never know.
Mhm. Yeah, I could definitely see that happening as well. I mean, if cassette tapes can come back, which they have, maybe
Yeah.
video, maybe video
I,
VHS can.
yeah, maybe VHS can. Okay, well, we'll move on. I can recommend this one. I will give it 3 stars. So
Yeah, I'd probably do the same. I recommend it. It's a fun film. Unless you're
yeah.
like really, really, really angry about Blockbuster, you'll probably enjoy this film.
Yeah, unless you're Lloyd Kaufman, the filmmaker who was in
Yes,
there, he hated Blockbuster. But he's the type of person whose films suffered at a place like
right.
that. So I get it. They should
Totally.
needed a few more of Lloyd's in there, I think. That would be good. Okay, we'll move on to our last film, The Battered Bastards of Baseball from 2014. I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie, even though it's only from 10 years ago, because our friend Victoria Roberts showed this in the now defunct movie club that I used to be part of, and so I think of this movie when I think of Victoria. Um, and it's a documentary about the Portland Mavericks, a now, of course, defunct minor league baseball team that was in Portland, Oregon. They played 5 seasons and from 1973 through 1977. And it was owned by the actor Bing Russell. And if that last name sounds familiar to you, that's because that is the father of Kurt Russell, who also played on the team and was like the team's vice president, I believe. So they were an independent team. They had no affiliation of any major leagues. And so, well, this has been described as like the true Bad News Bears, and it's true. This is actually a really good documentary. This is, I think, the best one of the bunch in this group in terms of just being really well made. It's a true underdog story that's actually unlike, the Bad News Bears or these types of. We see sports movies all the time. There was just one out last year with Michael. Fassbender that played at Salem Cinema, it was about a guy, like a team, the team of misfits that get together. This is like a true, like they had call outs from all over the country of these people that just showed up to play in this team. And it was a motley crew indeed. And so I thought this was a lot of fun. You do not have to be a baseball person to like this movie. I think people that like underdog stories will like this movie. What did you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I would agree. This was also my favorite of the four. Um, totally. I was so into it. My husband was in the other room while I was watching it, and when I was done, he was like, "You must have liked it because you kept laughing and going, oh no,' and like yelling out and stuff. Like you get really invested in this team
Yeah,
and
yeah,
wanting them to succeed. What I loved, that they were kind of a group of misfits, so to speak. That they were players who were really good,
yeah.
but like for whatever reasons, the big leagues were like meh. But
No,
then,
that was part of the cool thing about a lot of them were really good, but they'd been
yeah,
rejected by other teams. They were good,
right,
good players. It wasn't like, oh,
yeah,
they can't play and some guy
no,
has to come in and teach them how to play. They were, they just didn't make it other places. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that just what was cool about it was that because they were independent, they could just have more fun.
Hmm.
That's what I loved about it, and it also made me think a lot about how broken, how a lot is broken about our professional sports.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, because it's all about money.
like they
And
can't
this
have fun. It's
wasn't.
all about money, and they can't just say what they want and have a good time and joke about, get a broom out when they're pretending to sweep the other team away, like the silly hijinks they would do. Like, what that was fun, and I would much
Yeah,
rather go to a game that's fun like that
yeah.
than the totally sanitized version you get from pros.
Oh,
Uh,
exactly.
even
Exactly. And we happen to be
that,
taping this on Super Bowl Sunday. Talk about a corporate sanitized event, right?
yeah,
And so it just it's exactly right. It's like about the fun of the game. It reminds you why people fell in love with sports to begin with. So I highly recommend
absolutely.
this for sports fans, but even if you're not like me, like I'm not generally a sports fan, if you just like a good underdog story with lots of fun characters and people, I would
Yeah.
definitely recommend this one. I should
Same.
mention quickly where we can find all these movies. If you want to bear with Trees and Other Entanglements, it's on HBO Max, or Max as it's known now. Lost Highway, Women of Highway 20 is also on Max. Last Blockbuster is harder to find than any of them. It is on Tubi, which is where I watched it. Where did you watch it, Sarah?
You can also rent it on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, so you can rent it. And then Battered Bastards of Baseball you can find on Netflix. So thank you so much for being on the show, Sarah. It was fun to have you again. Can't
It was
wait to have you back. Yeah. And as always, you can check us out on our website, realfilmsnobs.com. And importantly, go to that YouTube page and click subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thank you very much. Have a great day and great movies.